For most of the 19th and 20th centuries, global development had a very strict definition. If a country wanted to progress, there was exactly one acceptable path: copy the heavily industrialized nations of the West. Economic theorists of the era operated on a top-down model. The prevailing logic was that importing heavy machinery, standardizing labor, and injecting foreign capital into assembly lines was the undisputed recipe for a thriving society. In this framework, the nation was treated as a single, uniform block. Planners used an exogenous approach. Exogenous means originating from the outside. They looked at a country from thousands of miles away and prescribed a single blanket solution, entirely bypassing local needs, terrains, and customs. By measuring success exclusively against a Western industrialized baseline, this system completely erased human and cultural diversity from the economic equation. We see the destructive reality of this model in the colonial economics of the time. Instead of fostering self-sufficient local industries, the system relied on massive extraction networks designed to make colonies strictly dependent on European rulers. To enforce this dependency, colonial powers actively dismantled existing local economies. Native textile manufacturing in places like India, Egypt, and Persia was highly developed and expansive. European administrators systematically targeted and sabotaged these native industries to ensure their own imported goods faced zero competition. This economic disruption carried an immediate human cost. Forcing a transition to Western industrial models dismantled established trades, uprooted millions of people, and severed deep social ties, leaving massive segments of the population without work. Attempting to drag a society into the future by erasing its past did not yield a thriving utopia. It fractured communities, leaving behind unstable environments and severe social collapse. By the mid-1980s, the flaws in that structuralist approach became too obvious to ignore. Economists like Amartya Sen argued that the goalpost had to move. Progress could no longer be measured purely by economic growth. It had to be measured by human development. This shift was deeply influenced by a branch of philosophy called phenomenology. Phenomenology is the study of how people consciously experience the world from a subjective, first-person perspective, largely founded by Edmund Husserl. Humans actively construct their social reality. A rigid, top-down structure shatters when applied to real people. Reality is a tapestry of subjective experiences. Sociologists call this ethno-methodology. Social order isn't imposed from above, it's continuously negotiated and maintained by the local actors living it. Once you accept that communities build their own realities, the idea of a universal development model falls apart. A policy that thrives in one cultural framework will collapse in another because the underlying social rules are entirely different. If a society is built subjectively from within, any attempt to drop an objective foreign blueprint onto it is practically destined to fail. This realization birthed a highly specific strategy: endogenous development. Endogenous means growing or originating from within a system. In economics, it refers to development driven strictly by a culture's own internal foundation and resources. This is a direct rejection of the outside-in models. Endogenous growth discards the century-old assumption that modernizing a country means westernizing it. In fact, it takes the opposite stance on history. Local tradition is no longer viewed as an obstacle to bulldoze. Tradition acts as the primary engine for innovation, social stability, and self-confidence. The guiding principle of this movement is simple: there are no frontrunners to be followed. Every single society has its own unique starting point and its own distinct finish line. True modernization happens when a community takes its own traditional elements and adapts them to solve contemporary problems, rather than trying to inhabit someone else's reality. To execute endogenous development on the ground, planners had to drastically shrink the scale of their operations. The unit of measurement went from the massive, abstract nation down to the highly specific local community. This requires a methodology called participatory action research. Here, local beneficiaries act as the primary researchers. You can see the scale of this involvement in community meetings like this one. In these spaces, local voices entirely drive the planning. Before a single dollar of foreign capital or a piece of outside technology is introduced, this method rigorously maps indigenous knowledge. Planners catalog the community's deeply ingrained understanding of their own environment and economy. Projects only cross the finish line when the people living there actively influence the schedule, the design, and the execution of the work. They are active architects, not passive recipients. Inviting the community to the drafting table is not a polite moral preference. It is a strict foundational structural requirement to guarantee that new community infrastructure is actually utilized and maintained over time. Let's look at how this plays out in a physical space. Imagine an agricultural community that urgently needs a new water management system to survive. Under the old exogenous approach, an outside agency drops a standardized, concrete-heavy Western reservoir into the region. As this diagram shows, the rigid dam awkwardly clashes with the local topography and completely ignores the community's seasonal agricultural rhythms. An endogenous solution looks completely different. By using participatory planning, the community integrates modern engineering with their historical knowledge of ancient aquifers, resulting in culturally appropriate water capture nodes that work with the ecosystem. Because the local population authored the exact layout of this system, they intuitively understand how it operates. They possess the cultural framework and specific skills required to maintain it independently for decades. When we zoom out, the contrast is stark. The old blueprint littered the developing world with rusting, abandoned monuments to foreign intervention. The participatory approach creates living, self-sustaining community assets. Ultimately, sustainable development is only permanent when it is explicitly authored by the people who have to live inside it. It proves that the future of a society cannot be imported from without. It has to be grown from within.